Welcome back to the smoke-filled room. We're glad to have you with us this week. I am on the road in Pennsylvania. My computer isn't working. My camera isn't working. So I'm doing this off of my phone where it's propped up on top of my suitcase. This is like the most hokey setup in the history of all hokey setups. This is what life is like on the road. It's not glamorous. I'm sitting in a courtyard so I can do an all-day training tomorrow to train candidates and activists and political workers. So this is what my life is like. Trust me, don't be jealous. However, we've got a great discussion, so no reason to keep bemoaning my weird setup here because I've got my political team with me. Abby, Chris, Matt, Michael, thank you guys. Glad to have you with us. We are recording this on Thursday afternoon. Veto session just ended as we're recording this. And so we're going to be giving you the updates that we have. There's still, I know the House is out. The Senate is maybe kind of still in, I think. They're probably going to shut down as we're recording this here. So we're going to maybe give you some, to us, live updates of what's happening. But we've got a few major topics to get to. I think the most important topic that we'll start with is tonight. You'll watch this tomorrow, but we're recording this now. The Bears-Panthers game hasn't happened yet. And I just want to predict the future because the Bears own the Panthers and the Bears first-round draft picks. And the Panthers are more likely to have a better draft pick. So the absolute worst thing that the Bears can do is lose tonight to the Panthers because it will bump them up in the draft pick that they will get. So the worst thing that could happen is the Bears losing tonight, which means I guarantee they're going to lose tonight. Chris, you disagree? Abby, I know you guys hate the Bears. Of course you're going to say that, but it's hard to believe this franchise will do the right thing and actually win tonight.
Well, the Bears have a real NFL quarterback now, so I would anticipate the Bears actually give it a good fight. But I'd also anticipate this game would end in a tie because that would just be hilarious.
That would be pretty funny.
Are you saying Tyson Bagent is an NFL quarterback? Is this what I'm hearing, Chris?
He's a better NFL quarterback than Justin Fields is, yes.
Stop. I can't even believe we're talking about this right now. You're better than this.
You have a future Hall of Famer in Jared Goff. So I mean,
let's
understand us peons down here.
Chris is still in love with he's still in his Jordan Love is the best quarterback in the NFL prediction.
Oh, no, I've never had that prediction. Out to lunch, my guy.
All right, we are going to do the thing I hate and start on national politics. But the biggest news, despite even veto session happening this week, the biggest news is nationally this week. If you haven't been living under a rock, you're aware of the fact that there were a number of major elections on Tuesday of this week, and J.B. Pritzker was involved with a handful of them through his Think Big America organization. And J.B. Pritzker has claimed victory on what was admittedly a successful election night on Tuesday for him. In Ohio, they won the abortion referendum, the amendment, which we'll talk about. He won. He was involved with 3 winning Virginia races where they took control of the state house. So it was a pretty good night for Pritzker nationally in his Think Big America. I'll give some more details in a second, but just want to open it up. Anybody have some initial thoughts on this?
I just want to point out that me, Oliver, and Abby were going back and forth in our group chat, and I was 4 for 4 with my predictions on Tuesday's election night in regards to what would happen. So, I'm the real political expert here. I know what I'm talking about.
Screenshot or didn't happen.
All right.
Chris,
you want him?
That's because you said such vague thing. The sky is blue, the amendment's going to pass, and the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Oh, I was right about all. I'm like, sure, okay, we all could have seen that happening.
When in doubt, just bet against the Republican Party, right? When in doubt. I mean, you're usually right more times than you're wrong.
Hey, Ohio and Virginia actually have some Republicans there, so there was a little hope, maybe.
Some.
No, there was never.
Some. I said some. I qualified it.
No, I mean, even with the Republican governor in Ohio, this is a pretty overwhelming loss on the amendment in Ohio.
Yeah, and I think go ahead, Oliver.
I'm going to talk over Chris today because he's going to talk as long as he wants about this issue. So I think it's a classic case of us not knowing how to message on this issue and not being on the same page, and the Dems taking advantage of it. I mean, Pritzker saw it here last cycle. We kind of sat on the sidelines while they called us extremists on this issue, and we did nothing. And so why wouldn't he take that stuff to other states and make it work? So.
And the other thing about the Ohio vote that was interesting to me was the wording of it. It enshrines the right to abortion in the Constitution, and then it has a little disclaimer wherein it says the state assembly can still pass late-term abortion regulations after fetal viability, which basically crippled the no side from being able to say this is allows abortion up until birth because, well, the amendment doesn't specifically say that. And what basically you're seeing now is that voters are more willing to, even people who favor abortion restrictions are more likely to support the pro-choice amendment with an exception than they would be to vote for a pro-life amendment with an exception. So I don't know.
I mean, listen, there's a number of things I wanted to cover here, and Chris, you kind of hit on the last thing, so I'll go out of order on my stuff. But I do think that those people are saying that this is a massive win, pro-abortion, big win. I believe are misconstruing what you're seeing. Because if you read this amendment, it's not saying, hey, listen, this is to enshrine abortion rights in the Constitution. It's saying that every individual has a right to make and carry out their own reproductive decisions. It's a whole list of things, including abortion, but contraception, fertility treatment, continuing your own pregnancy, miscarriage care. I mean, they did a very good job of how they worded this. And they also talk about how what Chris, you're talking about, which is abortion may be prohibited after fetal viability in the final paragraph. So, maybe and viability, which will all be determined by an abortion care provider. So I understand that this doesn't mean it actually ever will be prohibited or in any way infringed upon in Ohio after this is passed. But the way that it's worked, I've written a number or worked with attorneys to write a number of ballot questions over the years, and how you write it matters. And this is very, very well written, where you're just an average, sort of an independent or a moderate, and you read this and you're like, okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good. It doesn't say, hey, we would like to enshrine abortion rights in the Constitution. If it said that, I think the results would have been a little bit different, but that's not what this reads.
No,
it's smart on their part.
Yeah, and this is just the left outfoxing the pro-lifers once again.
Shocking.
And I don't know what's going to take to change everything here. I mean, you're going to have to completely reevaluate the way you're going to be, wording amendments and the way you're going to be fighting against these amendments. But right now, there has not been a significant victory for the pro-life cause since Roe was overturned last June. So, I mean, every amendment has just gone down in flames. So something's got to change here. I'll be honest in saying I don't know what it is, but something has to change.
Well, your point is a valid one. I mean, I know a number of pro-life leaders who mentally they're kind of checked out. I mean, and I mean this not in a bad way. I mean, in a good way. I mean, think about if you were fighting against Roe since the 70s, late 70s, that's 40, 45 years plus that you've been fighting against Roe v. Wade. That's your entire life, basically, that you're fighting against that. When that got overturned, there were a number of pro-life leaders who were like, I did my job. That's a long time to fight for something. And so mentally, that's it. You've done your job. And I can understand people who've sort of just checked out after that, because that's a long fight. I haven't been alive for 45 years, but to fight for something for 45 years, it's a natural thing to be like, okay, I'm exhausted. I'm done. And so I think you're kind of seeing that a little bit, that the pro-life movement has lost a little bit of steam because they got what they wanted. The problem is this fight has only just begun. And I think you're seeing a little bit now of the inability of the pro-life movement to sort of keep up with the current fight. The fight over Roe is over. Now the real battle has begun. And, we're seeing some challenges here on the right on being able to win this fight. I mean, I'm reading this amendment language, and this is a masterclass on how to message and how to prepare a message and an amendment. I mean, no one's going to say no to this. This is beautiful. This is exactly how you write this to win. We don't have that level of skill and messaging on our side of the aisle for sure.
I would say, obviously, like you're saying, Roe versus Wade, that was the number one priority for the past 50 years. And the path to overturning that was a pretty straightforward path. Just let's get more judges in there that agree with us. And we were successful. That was a massive win. But we have to figure out, okay, what is the next goal? Get everybody on the same page, and then also figure out what is the messaging that is most effective to defeating this. It's kind of like when we were doing stuff on the progressive tax, we did message testing and determined what the most effective message was against that constitutional amendment. And then those were the points that we were hitting home. It doesn't mean that the other points are not valid. It just means that those points maybe aren't the most effective. And until we as pro-lifers kind of get on the same page there, I think we're going to continue to have this problem. And it's got to be like more obviously a long-term strategy. I mean, I kind of see it as similar to like concealed carry, where it's like, hey, we got to just get a win a state at a time, and eventually it's going to be, you know, we're going to reach a consensus, but that's going to take time. It's not something that happens overnight, and we just keep taking it on the chin here, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I think it really, I mean, listen, if you're a hammer, every problem's a nail. I'm a messaging guy, so of course I'm going to look at every problem as a messaging problem. But you just see, you know, what this was and how it's reported on was that it was a 6-week ban, rejecting a 6-week abortion ban. I mean, I read this question. That's not what this is. That's not at all what this question is. I mean, if you're good at messaging, you can take an issue and package it in such a way that it's palatable to the average person. And what's on this ballot, this is not how this is written. This is not a 6-week abortion ban. It's just not what you read here. But that's what if you're good at the way you can package things in message, then you can pull things off like that. And we haven't seen that level of skill on Republican policies, on abortion policies, at least in my lifetime. I mean, it's definitely something we're going to have to get better at, because the narrative, the spin coming out of this is that Ohio has enshrined abortion access into their constitution, and it's a big win for abortion. And we'll be fair and balanced. We'll talk about some of the reasons why this is a big win for abortion rights. But in terms of, you know, what we do and how we fight back against this, I just don't know that this is the overwhelming win for, hey, look, everybody wants abortion in America. It's not really what this says to me. But, you know, again, we just lost, so we got to suck it up and accept the fact that we just lost.
This
I think
feels like a
Republicans-
classic case of Republicans just being behind the 8 ball. So like you're saying, well, you're saying some activists, or maybe they're just feeling a little bit burnt out. But, you know, looking at this, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, like the decisions were always going to go to the states. So in my mind, okay, we won at the national level. Now we need to be checking in, and if every single state has potential to change their laws on abortion, and we should have had at least some plan in place or some infrastructure in place to be prepared for stuff like this, because we all knew it was going to happen. So to me, this feels like a classic case of us just not being prepared for that next step in the fight.
To your point, Abby, I think that this is really useful, these election results, and we'll have to see as more of the election data comes in the next few weeks of what types of people voted for this. As we saw before, like in 2020, Trump won that state with 53%, and J.D. Vance won that with a similar margin. It's not a blue state, yet a progressive, or I won't even say progressive, a left of center ideological push happened overwhelmingly. So we can use this to see, because this issue isn't going away anytime soon, when you see what kinds of people who would traditionally vote Republican or independent, but cause them to get out and vote for this. And I think we could use this as like, look under the microscope of what's going to happen in 2024 and then 2026, because this is only one of the first states that this is going to happen. It's going to happen in other states too, but we need to learn from Ohio to not make the same mistake again.
Well, the big thing that I want to look at here, and as you said, I want to see the data, but we have some data now. I don't trust exit polls as much as I trust, you know, actual data. So once the clerk and the election authorities in Ohio release the data, we're going to dive into it for sure. But there is exit polling, and they look at who showed up to vote. And from the exit polls that I'm seeing, liberals accounted for 34% of the votes of the voters, up from 20% in the midterms, up from 21% in the presidential election. So record high turnout among liberals. On the flip side, Biden supporters didn't show up. What you see amongst Republicans is that they were only 35% of voters, which is down 6 points from the 2022 midterms. Turnout amongst women increased by 5 points. You know, so what I'm seeing here, and this is what we've got to be looking at, is and I just see the voters that showed up backed Biden over Trump, or stated that they backed Biden over Trump 45-43, but Trump actually won 53-45. What that means is that the people who showed up were more left of center. This drove turnout amongst liberals, amongst women, amongst people left of center. The reason why that matters is it doesn't really matter for politics not policy, for politics. If you put this on the ballot and it doesn't adjust your turnout, if you put this on the ballot and the same people show up who are already going to show up, then this didn't do anything to impact the rest of the ballot. It'll impact that policy. And if that's what you care about, I respect that. But for us, we're talking politics. And what this needs to do for the left, for it to be worthwhile, is it needs to actually change and drive turnout. The reason why I'm bringing that up is in Illinois, we talked about this. We did exit polling. We did research. We looked at the turnout and we saw that turnout was down amongst females, progressives, minorities, women in the city, urban voters. All the demographics that the left needs to win in Illinois actually didn't show up in 2022. And so if an abortion referendum can indeed change that and bring those people to the polls, that's a problem for Republicans in this state, because we performed extremely poorly in 2022, despite the fact that the electorate was actually pretty favorable for us. So what I look at in Ohio is, if this is true, if these exit polls are true, which I want to get confirmation before I take this to the bank, but if this is true, then this is bad news for Republicans, because this did not happen in 2022. Abortion did not drive women and progressives to the polls like it was supposed to. If these amendments, if these constitutional amendments accomplish what Dobbs was not able to accomplish, then Republicans are in for a really rough 2024.
And the other thing, again, assuming exit polling is correct here, the other thing that's interesting is just the drop-off from Republican turnout. Now, obviously, some of that is just the other side, turnout's increasing, so your percentage is always going to go down. But the other thing is, conservatives don't care about the abortion issue as much as they care about other issues. For progressives in the left, abortion is their issue. You can lower taxes to zero, you can give everybody guns, but abortion will always be the number one issue for liberals. It's just how it works. So until you make conservatives care about abortion, which I don't think you will, at least not any conservative who doesn't already care, who doesn't care about abortion currently, unless you can change that, it's not going to benefit conservatives at all. I mean, they don't care.
See, but the thing, Chris, is to your point, and I think you're right, there's already baked in here the people who care about this on the conservative side. The average Republican nowadays reading this amendment does not disagree with almost every word in this amendment. The average Republican is pro-choice, but also, or I'm sorry, is pro-life, but also pro-choice. Meaning, are you pro-life or pro-choice? The average Republican would say both, in that they respect the life of the unborn, but they also respect that this is a decision to be made between a woman and her doctor. And if you read the language of this, it's not saying, yay, abortion, yay, yay, yay. It's saying this is a medical thing, and we're gonna protect people's medical rights. And it's saying that abortion may be prohibited after viability. I mean, that line is just gold, maybe. And the average voter just looks at that and says, I don't disagree with any of this. I mean, even the average Republican. Listen, when you look at the data from the exit polls, and again, caveat, they're exit polls, but you look at the data, Republicans did not overwhelmingly oppose this like I think people predicted. And if you look at where independents were, I mean, 64-36, they supported this. Moderates, 69-31, they supported this. I mean, this language in here is not crazy far left pro-abortion. This is more mainstream abortion language that the average Republican would have a hard time opposing just as it's written.
So I think what needs to come down to it for the pro-life side of things is there has to be a new wording. There has to be some better, I mean, it all comes back to messaging, right, Colin? There has to be a way we can find that perfect wording, that perfect messaging, throw it on a ballot in a purple or a red state and see if we can make this pass. Let's test this. Let's try something new, because the left, they're going to have probably 4 more amendments in states next year because of this, that, Illinois might be one of them. Let's try and see if we can try some things out in our states to oppose us. And also,
well, listen, if Pritzker has his wish, it's going to be every frickin' state. I mean, he's going to be pushing this hard. He was off in the New York Times immediately after this win, talking about how abortion is the #1 issue for 2024. I mean, if he has his way, this will be on every state's ballot in the entire country. And that's where, on my side, this is why our rule at Core, at the company we all work for, Core Strategies, our rule is get the data and fully understand what it is you're looking at, because you can be right for the wrong reasons. And if that happens, you end up making the wrong strategic strategic choices. I'm looking at this data and I'm saying the takeaway to me is that messaging is key here, that the average American is not far left or far right on abortion. They're all, the average American is in the middle on the abortion issue. That's what I take away from this based on the wording of that amendment. That's not the takeaway that Pritzker and the Democrats are taking out of this. They're taking out of this that America is fully pro-choice, fully pro-abortion, far, far left in this issue, and that's not accurate. And that is not the takeaway from Ohio for sure.
But in A/B, I think my original point I was trying to make was in the A/B test, it seems like many Americans would much rather choose the far left position on abortion over the far right position on abortion.
Yeah, because there's a difference. If you outlaw it entirely, then nobody can do it. If you don't outlaw it, then people can choose to do it or choose not to do it. So if you're going to pick one position over the other, if you're in the middle, you're going to pick the option that at least gives people the choice, and then cross your fingers and hope they don't make that choice. So yeah, if you're in the middle, your only choices are outlaw it or let it happen, but hopefully they don't do it. You're going to pick the let it happen side because you're not going to fully outlaw it. It's just not something you're going to choose. So Chris, I believe that you're right in that.
Yeah, and it's just an artificial, not artificial, an extra hump that the right has to overcome, and that 70% of the country is automatically going to be against this in the A/B test.
Yeah, well, I think you guys aren't wrong. Some messaging work has absolutely got to go into this, and if we don't get our blank together on this before 2024, there are definitely some very, very concerning signs in this, and we're going to have to. I mean, I don't mean to sound like the pessimist because I usually try to be a little more balanced, but I've been involved with the Republican Party and conservative politics for a long time, and messaging has been our problem since the first day I've been involved in politics. So if it hasn't changed in 16 years, I don't imagine it's going to change in the next 1 year, but fingers crossed.
I would just say we were able to do it on the progressive tax. That means we can do it on other issues as well. We just have to figure it out.
I'm with you, Michael, but
I
think let's take the progressive tax example and let's move that over in Illinois to anyone who pays attention to Illinois politics, to SEIU. I mean, when SEIU was passed, we did the same level of polling for SEIU that we did on the progressive tax about here are the words you should use, here are the words you shouldn't use, here are the phrases and concepts that really work and that don't work. And then all the proponents who paid for this polling did nothing with it and still continued to focus, or opponents, I guess I should have said, and still continue to focus on the same things that the poll said didn't work and the voters didn't like. Meanwhile, SEIU on the left, the progressives used all the words and phrases and language that polling said worked really, really well for them. So yeah, it worked for us for the progressive tax, but then our very next big fight in SEIU, we forgot the lessons of the progressive tax, and we were once again horrible at messaging, even with polling data that told us how we should be messaging things. So I'm just telling you, just from my own experience, I wish we'd learned those lessons of the progressive tax, but we forgot it immediately after.
Well, the progressive tax, though, was a question that went directly to the voters, whereas SEIU, we had to state reps and state senators. They don't care what their constituents think for the most part. We have to look for these opportunities, especially in Illinois, on these constitutional amendments to use the right messaging, because we can convince a voter. I'm not going to convince Chris Welch to change his mind. He's already got it locked in, but
yeah, and you're right on that, and I agree, but I'm saying they didn't change their messaging at all based on the poll results. That's my point. So whether they were talking to lawmakers or voters, they once again ignored the data when it said don't say X but say Y. They still just kept saying X. So that's why I'm saying I'm not hopeful that we're going to be great at that in 2024. But let's move on to our next depressing topic, because Pritzker is going to have a lot of positive that we get to cover these first couple episodes. So let's just eat our vegetables so we can get on to more fun topics. So we're recording this on Thursday. You're watching this probably Friday over the weekend. Pritzker and Biden were just in Belvidere, touting the fact that the plant will be reopening. Stellantis will be investing $5 billion into the plant for I don't remember for how many years, but it supposedly is going to be creating up to 5,000 jobs. We'll see where that falls in. We don't know how much Illinois is investing as part of this. We know they are investing something. I really wish they'd release how much they're putting into this, because that is probably part of the equation here. But that's being kept under wraps for one reason or another. But I think what's notable to me on this is another situation of J.B. Pritzker and Joe Biden standing side by side. And you can see Pritzker's fingerprints all over this. Guaranteed he was pushing the White House and pushing Biden on the UAW deal, and working with UAW to get that support for Biden. You see, and they're standing together with the head of the UAW. I had his name written down. down here, but I have so many notes I'm missing it. Fain, I don't have his first name. So, I mean, there's clearly something going on here with Pritzker, Biden, the UAW, and the unions, and working together. I'm not putting my tinfoil hat on at the moment, but you can tell that this is all orchestrated for sure. It's a union issue, so I'm sure Chris wants to go first.
Oh, good guess, Colin. No, I mean, this is another great photo op for the Biden and Pritzker administration because, as we've seen in the post-Trump political world, is that people like jobs and people like their factories staying in America. This is something I wish we would have seen more out of the Trump administration. If Trump would have just done this every week, go back to a factory that was staying open and wasn't being shipped overseas, then we might have had a little bit more of a better chance in 2020 to reelect the guy. But now this is smart politics from the Democrats, keeping the jobs in the city, and keeping the jobs in the state, keeping the jobs in the country above all. And it's just a great photo opportunity. But yeah, I mean, UAW is not going to move anywhere. I mean, they're just going to stick with Democrats, unfortunately. But
I think what's important locally, I mean, there's two angles to this. There's the national angle where yet another situation where Pritzker and Biden are just like this. But I think on the local angle, if John was with us, I'm sure he'd talk about the local impact of this. I've got to imagine that Pritzker and Biden being able to take credit for this happening, any of those ledge districts or even the congressional district that's in play that goes into Rockford, Democrats are going to have a big advantage in 2024 because they're going to be able to play right off of this. So there's a couple ledge districts that are on the fringe of being in play in the Rockford area and in that county region, the Winnebago County, Boone County, kind of that area. We've got a major congressional district that we're trying to flip that gets right out into Rockford, and the current Democrat representative is from Rockford in the 17th. So, they're certainly going to utilize this to buttress their union bona fides going into the next election. And I know John would say, if he was on the recording, that if you want to win in that area, you got to have union support. So Pritzker and Biden packaging this up and locking in that union support for 2024 probably is going to take some of these seats just off the table for Republicans in 2024.
So I was actually talking to John about this the other day, and he said that their county board chair, who's a Republican, had his hands all over this visit as well and was going to be there, which pissed off a lot of local Republicans. It's not a seat that's up this cycle, but again, these are things that locals remember upcoming up in election cycles. So it'll be interesting to see who had their hands in it, who had a part of it, and what races are going to be impacted by it. So you're not wrong.
All right, let's continue on with the Pritzker national news. Last topic, finally, is I just found this interesting. The Republican presidential debate was this week. I'll open it up for like 7 seconds if anyone has thoughts about it. But really, the main takeaway for me was that Pritzker was there outside basically the venue doing press conferences, attacking Republicans, attacking Trump, attacking MAGA Republicans and all that BS. And so while the second week of veto session was happening here in Illinois, where pretty major things are being discussed, Pritzker was actually in Miami as a Biden surrogate attacking the Republicans. If Biden didn't already have a VP, I'd say this is all just one big job interview by JB Pritzker. It's just what it seems. So I'm not going to go too much into the conspiracy theories because I tend to think there is some truth to some of those conspiracy theories because all this smells a little fishy that Pritzker and some of these others are out there as much as they are. But anyways, just curious if you guys have any thoughts on Pritzker being down in Miami this week at the debate.
I would just say, I think that, if you're Pritzker, obviously Biden's he's going to most likely going to be the Democrat nominee. He's not really going anywhere. But if he kind of butters him up and, something happens between now and the Democrat convention next summer, he's an option. Or if he decides he wants to run for Senate, then maybe Joe Biden's all in for him. I mean, he's making the right move here, I think.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is the good news for JB Pritzker section. So this is not me saying there's anything wrong here for JB. Clearly, Democrats are pretty secure in Illinois. They're not worried about Illinois, and they're not worried about what may happen if JB vacates. At minimum, this is making him best buds with Biden so he gets some sort of appointment in D.C. if Biden wins re-election. If you want to get into the conspiracy theories, this is JB auditioning for his role in case either Biden steps away or something happens. There's a prevailing thought that I don't think is super crazy, that Biden's just there because they're goading Trump into being the nominee because Trump wants a rematch. The Democratic convention is a month after the Republican convention. So Republicans get locked into Trump and they pull the rug out and say, oh, we're just kidding. It won't be Biden. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I am saying that it's not the craziest of thoughts.
I think he's playing it a lot better than Gavin Newsom is, where Gavin's not really coordinating with the White House. Like he's going overseas and doing stuff. Like Newsom is kind of playing with fire there, where he could kind of piss people off. Whereas Pritzker is like buddy with everybody. And hey, I'm sending money to Virginia, sending it to Ohio. Look at me. I'm so great. Like smart move.
You know, the funny thing, Colin, is that J.B. Pritzker is closer to the White House than any of the people who were on the stage last night at the Republican debate. That's the really funny thing.
That's true. That's true.
It's unfortunate that you're not wrong, but anybody have thoughts on the debate itself before we move on to other topics?
I didn't watch it.
Versus Nikki Haley, and everybody else was just kind of there.
Who cares?
Matt, are you how are you feeling about Vivek? Have you moved on?
I've since moved on from like 5 different candidates ago. But you know what? I think that's a good thing. And Chris and Michael will say bad things about all of them up there, but I think that the Republicans have a good team, no matter who it is. I think you got a good choice in any one of them, and that any one of those people could take out Biden with the right campaign. So
those are the candidates who would lose.
Yeah,
Chris,
I mean,
to go hopefully.
Well, the field keeps getting whittled down. I mean, we'll see. They've got one more debate they've got scheduled now for next month on Newsmax. We'll see what happens with this field, but it does keep getting winnowed and winnowed to, I mean, the only chance you have against Trump is it's got to be a one-on-one fight. If the votes keep getting spread out amongst the challengers, there is no chance. And I know Chris will say there's no chance either way, but if you're going to have any chance, it's got to be a one-on-one fight. And at this point, DeSantis has pretty much proven he ain't the guy. I mean, he's run a horrible campaign. So, but I just don't see, I mean, DeSantis is term limited in Florida. So it's this or it's, I don't know what for the guy. So I think he rides this as far as he can. Which is kind of ironic because he's slated to lose Florida to Trump. So why would you stay on the ballot and have that kind of embarrassment? But I think he sticks it out, which means any anti-Trump vote gets split between multiple candidates. So every day that passes, it becomes more and more likely that Trump is going to be the nominee for Republicans.
I just can't believe his boots. It's okay to be short, Ron. It's okay.
Oh, gosh.
All right, let's move to veto session. We're not going to spend too much time on veto session, but we got to get through some of these things because obviously people will be looking for what the political ramifications are for some things that happen. First thing we got to cover is it looks like Invest in Kids is dead.
Rest in peace.
Sad. Rest in peace.
I mean, ultimately, we're talking about we've covered the policy of it over the previous few episodes here. So let's just talk about the politics, which is to me, I think, kind of a giant failure here that this died away. You've got some pretty high, powerful groups behind this. On the conservative side, you've got the Illinois Policy Institute and their lobbying arm, their lobbying organization, which is, as you can tell, pretty well liked by Rich Miller and that crew. They're buddies with the Mac Strategies group, but it didn't work. I mean, this thing didn't go anywhere. And then you have sort of the official organizations who are also pushing. I guess what I don't understand is why, even though the Eastern Bloc went with their all or nothing approach, it almost seems like to a degree, so did the proponents who were behind this. Yeah, they said we'll do a compromise. We'll take 50 million instead of 75 million. I guess my question is, there's a couple of things I didn't understand why they didn't do early. Number one, they finally came out in the final week with a push from unions. They had 4 different union leaders sign on to a letter supporting this. And I remember when we were running campaigns in this last election, when Invest in Kids came up, for our clients, we focused on that union issue specifically because there's a subset, a clause of this that does impact and help unions with apprenticeships. And there's a portion of this that does have sort of that worker angle. And we've seen in Illinois, when you go the jobs route, things tend to work really well. You had an economic route on this. You had a union, pro-union route on this, and they kind of just threw a bone to it in the final week instead of making it a centerpiece of this. Instead of just picking a giant fight with the teachers union, especially CTU, and expecting that you're somehow going to win that in a state like Illinois, in a state house like Springfield, everyone knew you pick a fight with the IEA, IFT in Springfield, you're going to lose. And so why they didn't play that union card a lot earlier, I don't understand. Also, why they didn't just look for some sort of a temporary relief for this. I mean, one of the things that is crazy to me is that there's no data on Invest in Kids because of the pandemic. The assessments that are required to have been done by the law weren't done in 2020. They weren't done in 2021. The 2022 assessment hasn't been completed. The organization that's in charge of doing that analysis still needs more time. They haven't been completed it. So that inaugural report doesn't exist. So we literally have no data on was Invest in Kids good or was it bad? And so the message here could have been, hey guys, let's make a decision on this once we have some data. So could we just extend this for 6 months or 3 months or however long it's going to take for them to come out with the stinking data? Like, there were paths here, but it seemed like the only path that would make the people behind this happy is give us a program that's long-term instead of let's just buy some time and try to continue this fight. So as a result, here we are recording on basically Thursday evening, and this thing is done. I mean, because they didn't get anything done unless the only option is that lawmakers go down to Springfield early. They go down before inauguration. They go down on December 30th or 31st, which they have done before, to do something. But you're not going to convince these lawmakers to go down to save Invest in Kids. That is not going to happen, which is why we say this is basically dead. So at this point, those people who have scholarships, they're gonna sunset. They're gonna be done, and you got a whole bunch of families who are gonna wonder what the heck did they do. These schools are gonna wonder what do they do. Yeah, they could maybe pass something in 2024 to clean this up, but what do the kids do in between? What do the families do in between? There are so many questions, and none of them good. So I just think this fight really, honestly, has been fumbled on a number of different levels, and as a result, a piece of good legislation is gonna die.
Yeah, we were talking a couple weeks ago, is the Eastern Bloc going to screw this over? Are they going to, kamikaze this entire operation? Didn't seem like that was really the death of Invest in Kids. It seems like the death of Invest in Kids was just not building the coalition necessary to actually put this thing together. I mean, there was always pieces there. We talked about the unions coming in at the last minute, trade unions. We talked about, the economics, the Illinois policy, and so all these things. But there's a larger group of people that could have gotten involved in this and gotten support for this. I mean, what I was talking with somebody at our in-person SFR, and I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, there's got to be Democratic votes to get this done. Because I'm thinking of how many areas, and I wasn't expecting the Black Caucus to do this. I never expect the Black Caucus to go against Chris Welch. But I'm thinking, there's some very blue-collar areas that are represented, some very blue-collar representatives. We might be able to pull this off, but it doesn't seem like the initiative was there. It's the same thing I see.
I agree.
Going back to some of this abortion legislation, the same thing I see with this abortion legislation now in Springfield lately is that there could be a coalition of at least opposition. It doesn't even seem like the effort's made. And it's the same thing with Invest in Kids. I think there was a coalition. Even if Welch said, I'm not going to call the bill unless I have 71 votes. In my head, there were interests at play, there was money to be spent, and there were people you could have gotten to vote for at least an expansion, but that never happened. It seems like this was half-assed, pardon my French, and that's the reason why it failed.
Well, and Chris, in watching this, it was definitely a very old school approach to trying to get this done. It was, bus kids down to Springfield to wave, printed signs. It was a very sort of old school lobbying approach. And I'll tell you that everybody sort of knows that doesn't work anymore. I mean, we do some level of grassroots lobbying. We call it grassroots engagement at core, because everybody knows that if you're going to get lawmakers to change their mind, it's not going to happen by going down to Springfield and waving some signs. It's going to happen by getting pressure back home, by getting their voters, their mayors, people at the schools, superintendents to just completely pressure those lawmakers. But the reason why some of these old school PR shops, old school lobbying shops don't do that is it's really, really hard. It's a lot of work. But this reminds me of Ronner's turnaround agenda, which had a lot of the same people involved, where it was like, I remember during that fight where I still have the documentation where they frantically reached out to everyone they know. Do you know a mayor who would back this? Do you know somebody in a community who would support this? And it was like, how do you guys not have the infrastructure to reach out in the grassroots? But I know these people. I remember them from when they were involved in gubernatorial races like McKenna and Murphy, where they don't have a grassroots network. They don't know mayors. They don't know local people throughout the state. And so they're not capable of running a something like this or to pass something like this. It was the same hole they had during the progressive tax. That's why a bunch of these organizations like TMA, the Technology Manufacturing Association, the Illinois Chamber, they banded together to create a grassroots group, because the group that was formed to fight this, all they were going to do was run TV ads because they didn't have any capability in the grassroots. And I think we know at this point, if you're going to get anything done, you have to go to the grassroots. And this group has just, they're great at getting press because they have a lot of good relationships with media members. But beyond that, getting actual grassroots support or opposition for something has never proven to be their forte. And here you go. You see this where there was really not at all. Yes, they got people down to Springfield. They bust people to Springfield. So they got bodies. It's grass tops. It's not grassroots, but that is related to grassroots. But you actually want to pass something in Springfield or defeat something in Springfield, you got to do real grassroots and build pressure. And that just wasn't done.
Part of me is just not surprised that this happened. Like Chris is saying, like you were saying, there just never really felt like there was the momentum or the drive to really get this done. It's like, yeah, this is really important. We should really fix this. This is really good. But like, there wasn't even, like you're saying, there wasn't even a compromise on the table. It just never really seemed to get the momentum that it needed to go. And so unfortunately, I'm sitting here and I'm not like, it's not like I'm sitting here with clutch pearls like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this didn't pass. Like, I think we're all sitting here and like, this is a very predictable outcome given how things played out.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I mean, on a number of levels. All right, let's move on to the next thing. Good news, at least. Sue Rezin ran a new Nuke bill that she worked out with the governor's office, the Senate Democrats, and a number of other sources, and it's passed both houses. So we've talked a few times over the months at this point about this, so we don't need to get into too much detail about what this is, but now it awaits Pritzker. And I think the interesting thing is Pritzker is going to have to put a signature to this or veto it yet again. He threw a bone to the environmentalists. Now the question is he going to do it again, or is he actually going to sign this good piece of legislation? I would assume the pressure is going to be so big he has no choice but to sign it. But this wasn't an override of his veto. This is a new bill. So now it's going to sit and wait for Pritzker to decide what he does with it. I'm not 100% confident that he's going to sign the dang thing, even though people hope he will, considering he should have signed the last one. So it's going to be interesting to watch what he does here.
I don't think he'll sign it.
Hopefully he does.
Weren't the votes fairly overwhelming though in both houses of the legislature?
They were last time too, though.
Yeah,
But they weren't like this overwhelming, were they? I don't remember. This was so long ago.
It passed with a veto-proof majority on the first time. It passed with an even stronger veto-proof majority this time. So it is stronger, but in each case, it was a veto-proof number. It was a very strong number in both the House and Senate.
That might be your only hope, is that if Pritzker vetoes this thing, they can go back down to override it, and then they might be able to do the investing.
It's actually interesting. I don't know how that works because there is no more veto session.
We gotta get kids. What is it? Schoolhouse Rock. We gotta get Schoolhouse Rock for veto session.
jeez.
Will there be yet another veto session that they have to add?
And do the legislators, do they care enough? Probably not, to go down just for that bill.
I don't know. At this point, I feel like even Harmon and Welch are kind of like, all right, can we please sign something in the law here?
I imagine he'll just be Sue Rezin there waving a flag, but maybe a few others.
I mean, listen, I give kudos to Rezin. She has shepherded this through, and it has been way harder than it should have been, but kudos to her. She shepherded it through, and it looks like hopefully it'll get a signature for Pritzker and, actually good legislation for a change. So that's not the worst thing in the world, but that's probably why Pritzker is going to end up vetoing it. So we'll see. All right, let's move over. Let's talk about some hypocrisy, because that seems to be one of our favorite topics here at SFR. So I just find it deliciously ironic that, in politics, as things change, people suddenly change what they're saying, because many people are not actually intellectually consistent. When something benefits their position, they're going to be over here. And then when suddenly it doesn't benefit their position, they're going to go over here. And we just watched the Chicago Teachers Union do that with the elected Chicago School Board, because when it was Lightfoot in office and they hated Lightfoot, they're like, elected school board, because the mayor currently appoints the school board. And so this whole push for an elected school board grew because of CTU's hatred of Lori Lightfoot. They've wanted this for a long time, but it really got to a head because of their hatred of Lori Lightfoot. Well, now they have one of their own members in as the mayor of Chicago, which means they would actually get to control to some degree who gets appointed to the Chicago School Board. And suddenly CTU's like, we'd be okay without an elected school board. So it's politics at its best and its worst at the same time. But in the meantime, as a result, the House and Senate down in Springfield are at complete loggerheads and odds about how to do this, because if you phase it in, then it's possibly not constitutional. If you do it all at once, then that's not the deal that was made, and it's a lot of hassle to be able to do that many elections that quickly. These are nonpartisan, so how do you do nonpartisan elections coupled with partisan elections? There are so many questions and problems that have been created by this, but that's somebody else's problem to talk about. We're not here to inform you. We're here to talk about the political analysis, and I just find the analysis here hilarious. Because CTU has just sort of said, okay, now we kind of feel differently. Now the House and Senate Democrats are like, what do we do? They can't figure out what the heck to do.
Yeah, and this was coming for a while, because when they first passed the elected Chicago School Board map, they had no idea how they were going to implement it then. They never thought through how they were going to implement it then. And now they're trying again, but now the teachers union isn't on the same page as they were last time. So the House reset, the House adjourned. They're not coming back. But now the Senate's still down there, and this will know
as of our recording on Thursday.
As of recording right now, this Harmon just called the Senate bill for a vote. So Harmon seems to be perfectly fine with putting his own version up and not do anything with the House version. So, and then I don't know, they might adjourn. They might have already adjourned again. This is Chris yesterday talking right now, but it would be hilarious if.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. They just posted the latest update that they're out of session. So now the House has passed one version, the Senate has passed another. They said this needed to get done this year. It ain't going to get done this year. So we'll see. They're kicking the can, and we'll see what happens next year, I guess.
This is amazing. I have been focused on the Chicago elected school board for the past year of my life, and yet, just yet, we have no idea what's going on. Who's going to get elected? They haven't passed the map yet. If you want to see my map, go to corestrategies.org/whatever I had the link be. Lane put in their subscription.
.com.
Is it .com? I don't know. I don't read my own website. Corestrategies.com. Look at my map. It's better than the one they're going to pass down in spring.
Well, and we're talking hypocrisy. Here's what I love about this whole thing. The reason why Harmon didn't like the House version is because, in his words, it had woefully inadequate ethical provisions. And at any point when Don Harmon is talking about ethics, we have completely jumped the shark in our politics.
Never change Chicago. Oh my gosh.
This is great. Nobody has any idea what to do or what's going on.
Oh gosh.
It seems to be a common theme in Springfield, is if you have a problem, you don't know how to solve it, just run out the clock. I mean, they do that with both dollars and dates. If you don't know what to do with them, just let it go.
Yeah, I'm rereading Harmon's press release and his quotes, and it's just like, how do you say this stuff with a straight face if you're Don Harmon? You just got to be such a level politician where you have no gag reflex, and you're just like, yeah, okay, I'm going to talk about this because it's the only avenue I've got to talk about. So then the House added the ethical provisions in, and Harmon still didn't take up that bill. He still passed his own bill. So it's
well, now they're arguing because the Senate wanted to combine two districts into one district to make it so that everybody was.
But not by the end of it. By the end of it, Chris, they were at 20 districts. So they were going to just run with the 20 district version by the end of it.
Right, but they were combined two districts apiece. Yeah. It was a whole thing. So again, there were still other problems that hadn't been worked out here in regards to the implementation of this bill. And this brings to the whole conclusion of all of this, is that our elected officials, in reality, aren't that smart. We all like to think about Springfield as a great, everybody's cutting deals, and these are the smartest political minds around because of how they run Springfield. No, these people are idiots.
I thought there was a lot of smart people in Springfield. What happened to that?
Harmon is smarter than Welch. DeRay thinks they're all geniuses, but Harmon's smarter than Welch.
I didn't say that.
These people are dumb. These people are stupid, and they have no idea what they're doing down there. And it's kind of funny at the end of the day.
The saddest part of it all is they have such a big majority that they can keep getting away with it. There's no Republicans who can make a stink of it or push back. It's like they could do whatever they want. They get away with their stupidity. That's the Democrats' new slogan: getting away with stupidity.
We dare you to win an election and stop us from doing stupid things.
Literally.
All right. Last couple quick things here. on veto session. So we predicted this. So I'm just going to point to that and say, yet again, hypocrisy. So yeah, they passed a staff unionization bill in the House. But then it went nowhere in the Senate. This has been done just for as long as I've been involved in politics, but for decades even before that, the strategy's been played over and over and over, where you pass a bill in one chamber and then just let it die in the other. But then in the one chamber, every single member gets to go home and say, look what we did. We passed this. It didn't actually pass because it has to pass both houses and be signed by the governor to be law. So they paid lip service to staff unionization. But here we are, veto session's over, which means this has to start all over again next session. And there's nothing that's been officially passed on unionization. So yet again, Democrats have said, woo, we're pro-union, and yet didn't actually do that thing that would be pro-union.
So dumb. So dumb. Why would you do this? They made such a stink of this in the House. Then they really think this is going to go away. Like, this is so dumb.
It's just governing by press release. Like, pass the bill, put out a press release. Look at us. We're so great. We're wonderful. Knowing that there's no chance that it's going to go anywhere, but at least you can put it on a mailer.
You know, the House Republican staff should unionize this to one up the Democrat staff here. This will never happen. We're not that.
Oh gosh, I'd love to hear those conversations.
Those staffers don't need to be a part of a union. Trust me, we know.
Make sense because it's a partisan job. Like, you're elected, your state reps elected, they hire their staff. If they don't get reelected, then the new person's going to come in and hire whoever they want. Like, it's just not practical. It's not like other jobs.
Yeah, but you see, Michael, that's why they added provisions into this unionization bill in the House that allow for that you can change out staffs if you have a change in who's at the top. So they did actually allow for that, because you're making a valid point, and so that's why they baked that into the bill that was passed in the House. So listen, I don't know the ins and outs of why this might be good or bad legislation. I just know the politics of it, and Chris isn't wrong in the politics of it. If you really want to start to get in the good graces of unions, this is a great way to do it. But I'm not a policy guy. I'm just a politics guy. So someone could email me why maybe that's bad policy, because I don't know. But I just know from a political standpoint, I think Chris is onto something.
When have Republicans in the state ever cared about bad policy?
I mean, that's kind of the thing, is that's all we care about is the policy side of it. That's why we keep losing, because it's a good thing. I give us kudos that we care about policy, but we then lose on politics. So actually, Chris, it's the opposite. When have Republicans ever thought about politics and got out of white paper, 17-page solutions on policies on every single thing?
Fair point. They do care about policy. I just happen to disagree with their policy a lot of the time.
See, there you go. All right, I'm going to break my rule one time, which is we don't want to inform. We just want to give you expertise. But there's one thing I just want to quickly inform people on, because for whatever reason, it hasn't even made the news at all. The Pritzker's mandatory veto on the Cook County nursing home stands because no action was taken. So SEIU has officially won their battle with HCCI. We're going to have to see what happens with these nursing homes. They're in trouble. They're having a lot of struggles financially, especially in Cook County, but really all over the state. So we're going to have to see what happens with these nursing homes. But I've got to imagine, I know some of these nursing home groups are very, very politically active. And I have to imagine that the HCCI and some of these groups are not going to be happy about this. So if Republicans are looking for an avenue for support, especially financial support, this is really one of those groups they should be calling. And I'm sure they are calling right now to make sure they've got these contributions lined up, because I've got to imagine these groups are honked off, and we've got a bunch of Republican candidates in 2024 who need funding. And this group tends to be pretty well funded.
It's a lot of unmarked ballots in nursing homes that Republicans can start to take advantage of.
Ballot harvest. DeRay wants to go ballot harvest in nursing homes.
That'd be fun.
I feel like you'd get a lot of pinched cheeks, buddy. You'd be popular.
Oh yeah,
exactly. It's worth it. You sit down, have a cookie and a cup of tea with them for 5 minutes. Next thing you know, you're walking out with another Republican ballot. So win-win.
You're going to make them feel
for legal reasons. That's a joke. That's a complete joke.
I mean, that's ballot harvesting, and that's the left does it. The right should start doing it. So I don't know how legally you got to be worried about that, but it's all right. I'm glad you're being careful. We have careful middle of the road careful middle of the road Matt this week. So we never know which Matt.
That's a really rare thing. I'm usually hyper partisan. So
Oh, there you go. It's good for you for 1 week, though. It's not really your job to be middle of the road, but whatever. All right. We don't have a ton of time, but we have been without the ability to talk about political updates for several weeks now. So we need to get into some of these political updates that we haven't been able to talk about. There's like 20, and we have time for like 3. So let's get through what we can, and then we will hit the rest next week, and we will definitely have a full agenda next week. But I know pretty big news in IL 12, and it's the biggest primary coming up for Republicans in March. So we tend to talk about it a lot. But conservative darling Jim Jordan has endorsed Mike Bost. I know the Bailey camp is going to spin this as, oh, it's just part of the swamp, but I got to tell you, I don't know. It's kind of hard to spin Jim Jordan. I mean, he was kind of the conservative choice, obviously, for speaker. He's been really well liked by conservatives. This isn't an endorsement by Kevin McCarthy. I mean, I feel like the Jim Jordan endorsement goes a little bit further, but Michael, tell me if I'm crazy.
I think you're right. And the one thing that I think is interesting is if you think back to that process when they were trying to elect a speaker, the Bailey campaign tried driving a wedge between Congressman Bost and Congressman Jordan by criticizing Mike for not endorsing Jordan fast enough and demanding that he do and those kind of things. Obviously, that wasn't successful because Jordan has still got Mike's back even after that, 3-week fight that we had to elect a speaker. So it's a victory for Mike for sure. And Mike's also a featured guest at a fundraiser in DC for Speaker Johnson's Victory Fund, along with a lot of other conservative congressmen. So that's another victory for Mike this week. 2 big wins.
Yeah, well, it's a good counterattack too, after last week with Bailey being in the news with all that Trump stuff.
Yeah, I mean, listen, these elections, it's like a boxing match. You get body blows, you get uppercuts, you knock them down to the mat, but it's not over till it's over. Every week is a new week. So it's not about who wins any particular week. It's about who wins on election day. But you got to have good weeks to have a good election day. So definitely good news for Bost after, as you said, Oliver, a really good week for Bailey last week. So we keep seeing the jabs back and forth in this campaign. It's going to be interesting all the way through March. All right, I don't want to stay too long in Butler's region, but I feel like Michael was the most angry last week that we didn't get to talk about certain political updates because apparently
yes.
West Cache is just is a Facebook post waiting to happen at any given moment and a controversy waiting to happen. So let's talk about Senate District 58. I know there's been a few controversies with Cache just in the last couple of weeks already, and it's only November.
Yeah. So there was apparently he was knocking doors in Jackson County, which in Murfreesboro, which is Terri Bryant's hometown, got in some kind of altercation with a voter at the door, accused him of being a Democrat and all sorts of things. We'll come to find out he's a Republican. And he made a Facebook post about that, criticizing Kash and telling people never vote for this guy. Then Kash made a post in response, basically calling him a liar and that the guy has some serious problems and that he'll be praying for him. So it's just been and this is
someone whose vote he's trying to earn. I mean, I think that's correct. The major point we need to make sure is clear here. This is a voter. This isn't like an insider or a political person. This is just a primary voter, and this is how Kash is acting. It's concerning.
Well, you're going to have, I mean, everybody watching this probably knows, like they've done it before. You're going to have positive interactions at the door and negative interactions at the door. And the negative ones, you just move on from because you don't know who you know the name of the person and that they're a Republican primary voter, but you don't know who they're connected to and what circles they run in. Like, it can be a problem for you if you make it worse than what it needs to be.
And you're right, Michael. And I think just from a governing standpoint, what I was kind of focused on is if this is how this guy handles what is just a barely negative interaction at a doorstep with a voter, if he were to win this race, God forbid, what's he going to be like in Springfield? I mean, if you're going to be an elected official, you need some level of respect for the voters and some ability to handle positive and negative interactions. And I don't want to see yet another political person who runs to Facebook to rant about their own voters or rant about things they don't like. Like, this is not a governing leader, which is what we need more of. And that's clearly not who this guy is based on what we're seeing. Talk about the second thing that just happened this past week.
Hamilton County Lincoln Day dinner. Afterwards, Wesley Cash's campaign manager Sam Stratmeyer kind of got in an argument with Terri Bryant, and he called her a name that I am not going to repeat on here. Otherwise, Lane would have to bleep it out.
We'll just say it starts with the letter C, and it's a word that none of us are ever allowed to utter.
The F word and then the C word together. So, you know.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not,
But didn't Wes and his dad Mark also have a confrontation?
yeah, they kind of like tried confronting Mike Bost, calling him a liar or something along those lines. And then his dad kind of continued to try to pick fights with other people as well, you know, calling them names and stuff. But thankfully, none of those really escalated to the level that his dad was trying to get them to. Wesley was just following his dad around. You know, he didn't really have much to say.
So clearly the apple has not fallen far from the tree here.
Yeah. Anger management problems, it sounds like.
Well, I know, Michael, I know he claimed you're a little guy, but I think you're a pretty big guy. So don't worry about that.
I'm 5'6", maybe close to 5'7", so it's accurate. I am a little guy, but you know.
Hey, listen, I know you tell all your dates sizes and everything, so we'll just go with that.
I'm not gonna pull a Ron DeSantis and put wedges in my boots or anything. I'm happy to be the height that I am.
You're confident in who you are, which is why I love you. So it works.
Oh, gosh.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, let's make a mental note of when we're getting Christmas gifts. Let's get Michael a pair of cowboy boots with some lifts in them, just because I think it'd be kind of fun.
Oh, yeah.
You can give him somebody else.
I'm sure Chris wouldn't be happy if Michael was actually taller than him, though.
If you have like 5-inch heels, I suppose he might be taller than me.
Oh,
You're not that tall.
I'm 5'11" and 11/12.
Oh gosh.
I think Chris walks around with stilts in his shoes.
Oh
Same.
yeah, definitely.
Well, I'll have to ask Lane how tall Chris is when they're playing flag football, because you can't wear lifts when you're playing flag football. So maybe we can get his real stats. We'll find out. It's like those NFL players or those college players who add like 3 or 4 inches to their height, in their official stats. Yeah.
Well, speaking of flag football, I do have to give a quick shout out. Lane Davis was named in the top 25 of the Fall Bolingbrook Flag Football League for his work at corner. So our producer Lane Davis, also good at flag football.
Wait, so top 25 of the Bolingbrook League?
Yes.
That's about as close to a participation ribbon as I've ever heard.
He was the only
How many people are in this league?
There's 8 teams. Like, he was the only member of our team who placed top 25.
Oh my God.
Okay.
That's like being valedictorian of your homeschool class. You don't tout this.
Kyle, I want to see you out there playing flag football during the spring season. You're coming out after the primary. You're playing Bolingbrook Flag Football League. All right.
Yeah, and you can tell my child at that point why their dad, I'm being very careful to not use gender pronouns right now, because we know and we haven't announced. You have to tell my child why their dad can't move or hold them because they tried to play flag football. It ain't gonna happen, man. I know my limits.
Other people have kids.
If it's a boy, they'll understand. If it's a boy, he'll
tall,
understand.
white, gangly, and unathletic, and I'm okay with that. Like Michael, I am okay with who I am.
All right.
I got Abe Lincoln's athleticism. I am funky looking, and I got those level of athletic skills. All right, let's go to Chris because we can't go yet another week without talking about the Cook County State's Attorney's race. So we have 2 topics. Maybe we'll mix them. Maybe we won't. But one of the updates that we have had in our list, in our agenda for I don't know what, Chris, 6 weeks at this point, is that Jim Durkin has been polling or was polling on the Cook County State's Attorney's race to potentially run as a Republican for Cook County State's Attorney. So since that's been on our agenda for so long, let's start there. We have another update on that race, but let's just start there. What are you hearing about that?
So Durkin had announced previously the week before Kim Foxx said she wasn't running, that he was looking into running for Cook County State's Attorney. And he'd been kind of out of the news. I had heard that now that Foxx wasn't running, he was kind of saying, "Nah, I'm not going to do it. I got no chance." Well, the reason why it's interesting, he's announcing now with all this polling that he might be able to win, maybe not. I think it has to do with the fact that the leading conservative candidate for the Democratic primary, Eileen O'Neill Burke, no relation. I think people aren't very confident she's going to win that primary. There's rumors that there may be more people jumping in the race other than Clayton Harris and Eileen O'Neill Burke. There's general anxiety after the Vallis race that a white conservative candidate can't take on a black progressive one-on-one, even if it's in the county and not just in the city. I think there's a lot of anxiety amongst interests that make Durkin think, I'll give it a shot. If I get through the primary and Clayton Harris is the favorite to win the Democratic primary, who knows who gets behind him and what type of money he might get. So I think there's a big reason why Durkin's he's now thinking about running now, and he hasn't really been active in previous months.
But I think the interesting thing is you're right. Back in, what was it, April or whenever it was, Durkin was talking about running, but we've heard very little since. Then he did some polling and we've heard very little since. I mean, we're talking about petitions are due in a couple of weeks from when we record this video. Like, I feel like we should either know or not know if the guy is running because petitions are due in a couple of weeks. If he is indeed still playing footsie, because there's no announcements, there's no official. I know people who have talked to him and he's told them that he's running, but that's not official. That's not public. So we can't really run with that as that being sort of gospel. But he is talking as if he's in here. But I live in Cook County. Chris, you live in Cook County. I haven't seen a petition out there being circulated, and you need a handful of petitions here. It's not an easy thing to get just these petitions overnight.
I know for the Democratic primary, you need 5K, and they're shooting for 10K. I usually, even for county politics, it's relatively the same. I know it is for the judicial races. I'll double check what it is for state's attorney, but it's still going to be a very significant amount of petitions that you're going to need to double. So maybe he'll pay through the nose to get them done. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but as we're about to find out, I mean, getting on the ballot isn't the only thing he has to do before getting to a general election.
Well, that's absolutely true. And I think a lot of candidates are learning right now how difficult it is to find petition circulators. It's been getting worse and worse every election cycle for like the last 3 cycles, even pre-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, it is almost impossible to get people to circulate, even paying them. And between the Ronner years where he paid way too much for field work, and then Trump paying people for field stuff, and now people have this expectation they're going to get paid in order to do field work. And so you just don't have a lot of people volunteering. And then when you pay, the going rate to get petition signatures at this point is like $5 a signature. And that's not even really for a valid signature. I mean, the costs here are astronomical. So you want to pay to get your petition signatures. It ain't going to be cheap.
Well, and if there's another candidate running, and I don't want to steal Chris's thunder there, but then you'll split the limited resources of Republican people in Cook County, and there's very few volunteers who'd be out there getting signatures, and to have them split in half is going to make his job even harder.
No.
Not that there's someone else running. I have no clue about that.
Well, let's just transition. I split it to make Lane's job a little easier when he adds in the stuff at the end, because we always make Lane's job harder. So I figured for once, let's make it easier. So Chris, I know we've got a candidate who has announced on the Republican side, and it's a brand new name that none of us have ever heard of. He's never run for office before. This is a new guy who isn't the next Jim Oberweis of politics. He's just very, very new and fresh, a fresh face. Who is it, Chris?
Yes, the new, young, very hardcore conservative candidate running for Cook County State's Attorney as a Republican is Bob Fioretti. See, here I thought Bob, he might
Where's
give
the
a go. He
balloons?
might be one of
How do you do it? I don't know.
He might
Isn't it like the gestures?
He might be one of the dozens of other no names running for president on the Republican ticket this cycle have no chance of beating Trump. I was also hoping maybe he'll give a shot at the Supreme Court in this state. That's up in Cook County this cycle. Maybe he'll give that a go. But no, Bob's going to run for state's attorney as a Republican. He had an announcement at the Billy Goat yesterday. I think it was yesterday. My days blend together at this point. I apologize if it wasn't yesterday. But Bob's running for state's attorney. So, Jim, if he wants to run for state's attorney, now let's get over the hurdle of Bob Fioretti in a Republican primary. And the funny thing is about this is in a Fioretti versus Durkin Republican primary, Fioretti would probably be the guy running to the right, which is insane to think about, considering the fact that Fioretti was a Democratic ward committeeman in the city of Chicago, a member of the Progressive Caucus on Chicago City Council, and he's the guy who might be the conservative bona fides running for Cook County State's Attorney. That is insane to me.
Well,
So
and Chris, it's not only just based on who they are and where they are politically right now, but it's also based on how they run campaigns. If Durkin runs for Cook County State's attorney, he's going to run a general election in the primary because that's what Durkin does. That's what his political people do. We've watched enough of their campaigns to know how they do politics, and so they're going to run a general election in the primary. And Fioretti is going to say whatever he has to say in any given moment to make people like him in that moment. So it's not only based on their past history that you can sort of predict that, but it's based on what we know their political tendencies are in terms of how they like to run things. And Durkin's come out with some pretty moderate and left of center statements on some social issues that are going to come back to bite him in the rear end in a primary, whereas Fioretti will throw out red meat after red meat because he won't care about a general election. So you're not wrong that in a primary between Durkin and Fioretti will be the conservative choice. Politics is really dang weird.
This is great. Fioretti
never changed Chicago.
Fioretti already ruined one primary for state's attorney back in 2020 when he ran as a Democrat, when he split the conservative white vote. He only got like 10% of it, but it was 10% that could have gone to Bill Conway, which might have gotten us a little bit closer in that race. But that's besides the point. Bob's running again. And listen, Bob's a nice guy. He's a funny guy. He's, he makes you laugh, and
when he's all there, he's funny. Let's clarify. When all the faculties are there that day, then he's pretty funny.
He's a pretty funny guy. He's a pretty nice guy. But at the same time, Bob, please stop running. Please, for the love of God, stop running, because I know damn well in 2026 he'll be running for governor.
I mean, but it's hard to say. I mean, he's run a lot, but so has Jim Durkin. I mean, let's be honest, this isn't Jim Durkin's first run for political office either. Now, he's a little bit more, he's not a perennial candidate like Fioretti is, but it's not like Durkin's a fresh face either. But I think this is a misplay on the Durkin side, because if you were going to run for this, if you are a political strategist, your number one goal is, in a race like this, avoid a primary. And Durkin playing footsie with this race and not making a major announcement and not coming out and boxing out the field to make sure you're the guy a long time ago is what led to Fioretti in this race. Had they come out stronger a couple months ago, had they consolidated support and got, Morrison, the county chairman, and a lot of the township committeemen on board, and gotten some donors and done a big public announcement and sort of rolled this out in a strong way, there's a decent chance they would have avoided a serious primary. Someone else probably still would have jumped in, but not someone like Bob Fioretti, who could possibly beat them in a primary. By misplaying that, now they got a serious primary. They're gonna have to spend a bunch of resources, and it's no guarantee they're actually going to win that race.
Yeah, I what I'm going to say is probably going to happen, because I'm going to be a nothing ever happens kind of guy. I wouldn't be surprised if Durkin just doesn't even run at this point. He's not going to get the amount of signatures he needs to get on the ballot unless he pays up the wazoo and he mobilizes every able-bodied, sane person in the Republican Party in Cook County, which isn't a lot, mind you. You're looking at one of them on the call right here. That's Colin. But yeah, I think it's just going to be Bob Fioretti as a Republican. That's my prediction. And then everybody pray to God Eileen O'Neill Burke wins the Democratic primary.
Well, and that's the interesting thing is, like, in theory, they could be passing petitions now. They've done so much behind the scenes with this polling and everything else, and Durkin telling people he's going to do this. Like, it's not like they just decided yesterday. They've been thinking about this and talking about this. So in theory, it's a big county. They could be circulating, but we're all pretty connected and pretty plugged in. We would hear about it, most likely, not guaranteed, but most likely we'd hear that those petitions are out there and we would see them, and we haven't. It's not to say that they're not out there. It's a big county. So maybe they're just doing it really, really quietly. They got a small group out there doing it. It's possible, but I'm just saying we haven't heard, and we tend to hear, especially in Cook County. So it's really interesting. I think, let me make sure I'm balanced here. I like Jim Durkin, and I think he'd be a great candidate for this. So my previous comments were not to in any way indicate that I don't think Jim would be a good candidate. I just think it's been misplayed so far, and now it's a risk. And even if they do come out of this primary against Fioretti, all those resources they will have wasted are resources they could have spent against the Democratic nominee. So it seems like the fumbles already are costing us, and you're going to have to thread the needle, even if it's Clayton Harris. Everything has to go right, and you'll probably still lose that race. I mean, this is going to be the tough absolutely toughest race against even a Clayton Harris. If Eileen O'Neill Burke wins the primary on the Dem side, I don't think a Republican has a shot. But if Clayton Harris does come out of that primary, you have a chance. You blow a significant amount of money in the primary. That just took your chance that was only this much before and makes it, now only that much.
And then you're hoping that you're going to line up some of these Vallis or Eileen O'Neill Burke donors. Like, that's who you're hoping to line up with in that type of general election. So again, I'll reiterate what Colin just said. I think Jim would be the candidate, unless you found another like Pat O'Brien type, something like that. But Durkin would be a good candidate for this race. But a million things would have had to have gone right for this, and right now I can count 3 which aren't going right.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, the reason why they may not have gone public with it is they may just be watching the Republican primary. The people who work with Jim Durkin understand politics, and they are always very focused on national politics, and they're acutely aware of the Trump effect. So I would imagine they're telling Jim and anybody else that if Trump's the guy, we're not going to win this, and they're probably not wrong. So maybe that's why they have held off. But at this point, Jim telling people he's running, I don't understand that. Either you're out because Trump's going to be the nominee, and that means Cook County is just kind of dead for Republicans, or you're in and you're in no matter what. But this sort of tiptoeing around it, like we all know Trump's basically, I'm sorry to say it, Chris, go ahead, cheer. Trump's going to be the nominee. So either you're in with regardless of that, Durkin, or you're not. But like, make the decision here, because if you weren't going to run because Trump's at the top, then just say that, and we're stuck with Fioretti. But that's not what he's saying. I mean, his political advisors, I'm sure, have told him that Trump's going to be the nominee. I'm sure they can read just like we can read. And so if they've been telling him that and he's still telling people he's going to run, then clearly he doesn't care about that factor.
So I'll make one final point because we've beat this topic to death. I don't think Trump being the nominee matters in a race like this, because this type of race you're dealing. I looked at the election returns from 20 in this race. I analyzed them in a fine-tooth comb. You have the right messaging.
I worked that race, Chris, so I can tell you from experience. I mean, you mentioned Pat O'Brien. He beat Biden on the ballot. He won 35% more of the vote than Trump did. You can only overperform the top of your ticket by so much, and O'Brien overperformed by 35% and still lost. Like, the problem is
he could have done better.
Hold on.
Chris,
let's just clarify something, because Chris, you understand data. The average person, when they hear an overperformance of 35, they think, okay, that sounds like a solid number. You understand more than most that to overperform the top of the ticket by more than 5 or 7 or 8 is like unheard of. No. 10, 15 is ridiculous. 35 is like record breaking, has never been done before, and they still lost. So you're telling me they could have done better. It is mathematically impossible that they could have done better.
They certainly could have done better because you have to break down the data geographically as well. If you could have done, because you did phenomenally in the white parts of the district, especially my neck of the woods. The north side, they like their progressive policy, so they didn't. Their performances were insane there as well. The difference would have been Latinos. I mean, if you would have gotten a better overperformance amongst Latino voters in 2020, you would have gotten closer in the 2020 race. And
yeah, so closer, but wouldn't have won, I think is the point. Trump's the nominee. There's just this does not. You can't say that suddenly Cook County's okay even if Trump's the nominee. When we're saying the suburbs are toast if Trump's the nominee.
Is Cook County? I mean, I think there are certain races which kind of transcend national politics.
I don't disagree with you, which is why he'll still be able to go closer than most. But remember, Pat O'Brien still lost by 12 points? I mean, it still wasn't even super close. So at the end of the day, I think your perspective from the south suburbs is coloring your opinion of all of Cook County. The south suburbs, maybe Trump doesn't hurt you as much, but in the North Cook County, Trump is a killer.
Yeah, and you people just ruin everything. I swear to God, man.
We're the problem.
You and your land of family videos, and you still got your family videos down there. I'm sorry that we have civilization up by us.
Oh yeah, civilization. My ass.
Has anyone noticed that throughout the episode, Chris's camera the brightness has gone down, and there's gotten less and less color? I think the more we talk Chicago and Cook County politics, it just darkens the room he's in.
This is dark, man.
Yeah, I think we got to get Chris's camera fixed. I mean, if I could show you how hokey my setup is, and it's still even better than Chris's is, and he's on his main camera. All right, for time, let's get to one more topic.
It's dark outside. That's what it is.
That's why they made these things called lights. Anyways, let's go to Oliver, because poor Oliver hasn't been able to talk. And I want to talk about House District 83 because this is just finally starting to hit the news. I had seen some things on this, and I wasn't allowed to share it because they were not public documents. But it is now public that incumbent Democrat State Rep Matt Hanson has been arrested for a DUI in House District 83. And House District 83 is absolutely a race that Republicans could win. I know some will say maybe not, but those numbers are not bad for us in 83. We didn't lose it by that much this last round. So Oliver, I know this is kind of in the fringe of the area you cover, so maybe you won't have too much on this, but just curious if you've got any thoughts on this race.
So for context, this is Keith Wheeler's old seat. Well, the one they gerrymandered for him, and I think those numbers were a little bit high for Republicans because Keith Wheeler is so well liked. But again, I could be wrong. So this is an interesting opportunity for Republicans because we don't have anyone running against Matt Hanson right now. So obviously this is not a good look for Hanson. You know, he has a primary challenger too, so who I'm sure is having a great day today finding out this information. So it ought to be interesting how this plays out. But again, it's an opportunity for Republicans to pick up a seat, and maybe they wouldn't win otherwise. But again, you know, we're not recruiting House candidates like we should this cycle. Well, really everywhere. So
yeah,
it seems like a miss.
It's a Democrat district. It's somewhere between D3 and D7. I say D3. I'm sure other people will say D7. But that's not outside the realm of possibility, especially if Hanson wins this primary. If he's the nominee, you know, voters have shown that they will forgive a DUI in your past, not right now. Meaning if you run for office and you're not an incumbent and you say, hey, I've had a DUI, at this point, it's normal enough, it's been normalized enough that doesn't tend to hurt candidates too badly. But to say I was a sitting elected official, and this wasn't just sort of a standard DUI, there's kind of a sort of a more interesting story sort of surrounding this issue, where you could put this up at a TV ad and cause some damage. So if Hanson does end up being the nominee, what is a D3 to D7 district suddenly becomes even more favorable. I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but we got to find a candidate in House District 83 because Republicans, this could be one of those sneaky races that you could actually make some noise in.
Absolutely. So hopefully they find a candidate. I know it's been a challenge this cycle, but again, it's an opportunity for Republicans if we can seize it.
Yeah, well, the first days to submit your petitions are 2.5 weeks from the time of this recording. So
get to work,
gotta
folks.
move. Gotta move. All right, we are, as always, way over our time, but we've covered a lot of really good stuff, and we have a ton of other good things that we could cover. Let me look at our time here. Yeah, we're way over time. I was going to maybe give Michael one more topic. Let me just give a quick rundown of the things that we haven't talked about. So for political updates, unions are looking for an opponent for Blaine Wilhauer. We'll talk about that. We still haven't talked about the new candidates in Senate District 37. We got a new candidate in the 11th Congressional. We got primaries in House District 116 against Severin. We got a new candidate in IL8 that we probably got to talk about today because we seem to always be stuck with the Rice family in that region. Oliver, I know you've got some updates on some races in your area. We got a ton to cover. And I wanted to talk about some topics that I wanted to rant about. Like JB Pritzker wants us all to give him praise for the fact that Illinois has the second worst credit rating in the entire country. But apparently we're supposed to applaud JB Pritzker for getting us to second worst instead of first worst. So yay, JB,
better.
good job.
It's getting
way
better.
to go. Way to go, JB. Second worst in the country. You should put that on a yard sign. Anyways, I appreciate everybody's time today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us. If you haven't liked and subscribed to our channel, please do so. We do these every week. We got a lot of awesome content coming up. Thank you to, let's try to see if I can do this backwards, Michael, Matt, Chris, Abby, for joining me this week. Thank you to Lane Davis, my producer. I'm really excited that this hokey thing I have all set up didn't fall apart. See if I can take a photo of just how awful this whole thing is. I've got like a leaning tower of Pisa of stuff here to hold my phone up, but it works. So yay, way to go. We actually made it through the episode. Thank you, everybody. I'm Colin Corbett. We will catch you next week.